All right, you're building your business and you're trying to think of ways to scale. How do I scale this business and really make it something where it's not everything is on my shoulders? Because I sometimes feel that way, and I know a lot of people feel that way. So one of the things I'm super excited about today is I'm bringing on an expert when it comes to freelancing and freeing up yourself, so to speak, on getting away from some of the tasks. You can focus on what you're good at and what you enjoy doing. So really excited to have with me here Nathan Hirsch from FreeUp. So Nathan, thanks for being here.
Kevin, pumped to be here. Excited to talk Amazon hiring, e-commerce. That's what I'm all about.
Yeah, exactly. And, for those that maybe aren't 100% familiar, you've built basically a marketplace where people can go and they can hire freelancers, and a lot of them are, vetted and things of that nature. So before we get into like the hiring part, can you just give us a little bit about your background in e-commerce and how you even got into this whole world?
Yeah. So growing up, my parents were both teachers. So I always
Okay.
grew up with the mentality that I was going to go to school, get a real job, work for 30 years, retire.
Right.
And my parents are doing that now and traveling the world and loving it. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're both retired. So I grew up with that mentality. And from the time I was 15, 16 on, whatever the legal age was to work, my parents always made me get these full-time jobs. So
Oh,
I was
wow.
working 40, 50 hours a week from the time I was 15 on. And I learned a ton about sales, about marketing, about customer service, about business. But I also learned how much I just hated working for other people.
Right.
So by the time I got to college, I kind of looked at it as a ticking clock. I had 4 years to start my own business. And if I didn't, I was going to go into the real world and have bills and responsibilities and have to get a job and all that. And so I started hustling, and I started competing with my school bookstore, buying and selling people's textbooks. I would offer more money than the bookstore. I would hold on to the books until the beginning of next semester, sell them for a
Mm.
profit. And I would sell these books to different distributors. Well, one of these distributors, this is back in 2008,
Hmm.
was Amazon. And no one knew what Amazon was. It was kind of like this big bookstore that was just starting to sell other products. And I thought it was so cool that I could have this 24/7 storefront. Money would get automatically deposited in my bank account. It was like I got to use my customer service skills, like responding to emails. And I remember one day I got a cease and desist letter from my college telling me to stop selling books because I was competing with their bookstore. And my parents were teachers. I didn't want to get kicked out of school. So I pivoted, and I just had to figure out what to sell on Amazon besides these books. I kind of looked at
Uh-huh.
Amazon as this key to start a business. And I started experimenting with stuff I was familiar with: video games, computers, sporting equipment, like typical college guy stuff, right?
Right.
And I just fail over and over and over. I can't get anything to sell besides these books.
Hmm.
And it's not until I branch out of my comfort zone and come across these deals for baby products that my business takes off. And I have this concept of drop shipping before I even knew it was called drop shipping. It wasn't even called
Okay.
drop shipping until years later. I would reach out to these manufacturers, US manufacturers. They didn't know what Amazon was back then either. I was like, hey, I have this additional revenue stream for you. All you have to do is ship the product where I tell you to do it. You can keep my credit card on file, charge me every time that there's an order. I get to list the product at whatever price I want, and I make the difference. And all I asked was that they keep me up to date when stuff goes out of stock and when they change prices so that I could update it on my end. And it was a very basic relationship that was mutually beneficial. And this business took off. I mean, I was making more money than any college kid should. And I remember my parents telling me, okay, you should probably pay taxes. So I meet with an
Yeah, that's usually
accountant,
a good idea.
usually a good idea. So I meet with an accountant, and the first question he asked me is, when are you going to hire your first person? And I kind of shrug him off. Like, why would I do that? That's money out of my pocket. They're going to
Right.
steal my ideas. They're going to hurt my business. I'm sure you've heard it a million times. Standard
Yeah.
entrepreneurial excuses. And he just laughs in my face. He says, you're going to learn this lesson on your own. So my first busy season comes around, the fourth quarter. I don't know that the fourth quarter goes crazy in e-commerce. Black Friday, Cyber Monday
Hmm.
wasn't even really a thing, but Black Friday, I just get destroyed in the fourth quarter. I'm doing everything. I'm answering every email, changing every pricing,
Mm.
fulfilling every order. I'm working 20 hours a day. My social life plummets, my grades go down, and I work my butt off to keep this business alive going into January. And when I finally make it there, I'm like, oh my God, my account was right. I can never let that happen again. I need to start hiring people right now. So I'm 20. I know nothing about hiring. Post a job on Facebook. This guy in my business law class says, hey, I don't know what you do. I need a job. I just hire him on the spot. I don't even interview him. Ends up being this unbelievable hire. He's hardworking. He's smart. He's actually my business partner today with
Oh,
FreeUp.
wow.
His name's Connor
So it
Gillivan.
really worked out.
Really worked out. Complete fluke, hit the jackpot. But there I am as this 20, 21-year-old thinking, man, this hiring thing's easy. You post a job on Facebook, someone shows up, you make more money, your life becomes easier. And I just proceed to make bad hire after bad hire after bad hire. Quickly learning that college kids, not very reliable. No one who is 30 in the real world wanted to work for a 21-year-old Amazon seller. And so I moved to the remote hiring world, the Upworks, the Fivers, and made some okay hires, people that are still with me today. But I also just hated the process of posting a job, getting 50 people to apply, all the interviews. If I hire them and they quit, I start all over again. And I kept looking for a better and faster way. And that's when I came up with the idea of FreeUp. So that's the short, long version of how I went from a broke college kid to books to baby products to FreeUp.
Wow. So that's interesting there. You really hit the jackpot, the home run, something all aligns with your very first hire. And, that's one of those things that maybe not necessarily is going to happen for everyone. But some of it too is, I think a lot of it is we all have to be intentional about like what it is we need help with. So like if someone's looking at their business and they're saying, I've got all these tasks, I'm overwhelmed, maybe I have a full-time job and I'm doing this on the side, or maybe I'm doing this full-time and I thought, when I left my job, I'd have all this time. Then they realized time just filled in the space. So, how would you recommend, I guess I should say, someone to go about figuring out what do I start delegating to someone else?
So I like to divide hiring into 3 different categories. You got the followers, you got the doers, and you got the experts. So followers, think $5 to $10 an hour, non-US. They might have years of experience because FreeUp's not a marketplace for newbies, but they're there to follow your systems, your process.
Right.
If you don't know how to do something yourself, if you don't have a process for it, you can't just hire someone for $5 an hour and say, hey, go run my PPC because I don't know how to do it. That's not going to end up very well for you. Then you got the doers, the graphic designers, the Amazon listers, the bookkeepers, the writers. You're not teaching a graphic designer how to be a graphic designer, but they're not consulting with you either. They're doers there to do those projects for you at a high level. And then you got the experts, high-level freelancers, consultants, agencies that bring their own systems, their own processes to the table. They can consult, they can project manage, they can execute high-level game plans. And you have to figure out where you are as a business owner. And you might need multiple things, but if you're someone that's stuck in the day-to-day operations of your business and you're not focusing all your time on expansion, sales, marketing, building your brand, then you need to hire those followers. You need to figure out, how do I get 5 hours a day, 10 hours a day, or a week back? That should be your first step. If you're someone that's branching too far outside of your core competencies, because the average entrepreneur and the average Amazon seller or e-commerce seller is only good at 1 to 3 things. Your thing might be sourcing, your thing might be PPC analytics, it might be listing products, whatever it is. You have to figure out, hey, I'm not the best person to do these EBC designs, or I'm not the best person to write these listings. And you need to hire specialists to quickly turn those weaknesses into strengths. And then for the experts, yes, you could spend the next 6 months learning how to be a Facebook ad expert, but that's probably not a good use of your time. And you can't do that with every single part of your business. You can't master everything. So at certain things, you need to hire those experts to come in and hit the ground running right from the beginning. So that's kind of how I divide it up. And it really depends where you're at as a business owner.
Gotcha. So for the person who's like, they've never done it before, they're looking at like, okay, I got these 3 different buckets I could go with. I don't even know where I would go. So like, how would they take a look at like, is it their skills versus their strengths, the things that they're avoiding? What are some, like, this is kind of a clue. This is what you should start with delegating.
So I would start even before you figure out what to delegate. I would start by figuring out what your budget is. Look at how much money you made last month, and then say, how aggressive or how conservative do you want to be? If you want to be super aggressive, you want to grow that empire, maybe you're investing 50, 60% of your profits back into hiring. If you're more conservative and everyone's in a different place in their life, in their business, maybe it's 10 to 30%. But if you pick 20%, you can always go up 5% next month or down 5%. But that percentage is going to tell you, hey, this is how much money I have to play with. From there, I like to create 2 lists. The first list is everything I do on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. I try to prioritize it from easiest to hardest, especially if you're new to outsourcing. Those easy tasks are going to give you a lot of experience. You're going to learn a lot. And I try to put a dollar value next to each task. This is a $5 an hour task, $10 an hour task, trying to understand what my time is actually worth. If I have zero revenue, my time's not worth very much. If I'm doing $500,000 a month, it's worth a good amount. So the dollar value, and you can prioritize that in different ways. I mean, there are certain people just hate doing certain things. Try to eliminate those first. What's the point of being an entrepreneur if you hate what you're doing every single day? But that's the first list. And the second list is everything you're bad at. And I would talk to your business partner, your wife, your husband, anyone that you already have on your team. Try to get some honest feedback. There's sometimes you think you're good at something, but you're really not. And identifying those weaknesses is key to hiring those specialists and those experts. So that's a good place to start. And once you know what the budget is and you have those two lists, you can just say, hey, these are the things at the top of the list. This is where I can get started.
Okay, gotcha. So let's say that they've identified, this is where I want to get started. Whether it's FreeUp or somewhere else, how do they do they post a job? Do they outline it? How do they make it attractive to the right person that either fits their budget or has the right skill set, or, is the best mix for the value of what they're looking for?
Yeah, so you've created a budget, you have these lists. Next, once you pick something from the list, you want to figure out what your perfect person looks like. Are they an employee 40 hours a week that comes to your office? Maybe you need a warehouse staff. Are they a VA in the Philippines for 10 hours a week? Is it a graphic designer that you just want to add to your Rolodex that could be dependable going forward, that you might use a few times every single month? Really identify, are they the follower, the doer? Are they the expert? What's the price point? What's the location? Are they remote? Are they not remote? And once you've really identified it, and you can write all this down of all the skills they need to have and the background and the experience and all of that, try to think of what type of people you like working with. I tend to talk fast, move fast. I'm not very emotional when it comes to business. I'm kind of direct and to the point. If you surround me with a really good graphic designer, but they're warm and fuzzy, they can't move at my speed, they're not going to take direct feedback well, that person's not going to work very well with me, even though they might work very well with a lot of other clients. So I try to figure out, what does that person look like and what type of people do I enjoy working with? And from there, that's how you create the job posting, or with FreeUp, what we call a ticket or a freelancer request.
Okay. So let's say you put in your freelancer request and now you've got some candidates. And how do you figure out, okay, who's the right one?
So the biggest mistake I see with interviewing is not prioritizing the interview correctly, because you might have to interview one person to find it. You might have to go through 5 different people. You might learn something while you're talking to people and you're like, wow, I should have put that in the description. And you might have to go back and start the search over again. As you get better and better at hiring, you get better at that process. So for me, let's say that I need a virtual assistant. I have a team of 15 customer service reps. They monitor my Skype, my email, my live chat 24/7.
Oh, wow.
Some of them work nights, some of them work days, but I have a schedule that I need them to work. Let's say I have an opening in the graveyard shift. The first question I'm asking during the interview is, are you comfortable working 9 to 5 Eastern time? That's the graveyard shift. And I'm not moving on from that question. I'm going to pull out, hey, what are things that could come up that are going to prevent this from happening? Whether it's the health issues, whether it's have they done it before? Do they have any experience with it? Or are they just going out on a whim and thinking they can handle it? Because if I don't get a good sense that they can handle that schedule or whatever it is, the schedule might not be important to you. Maybe you want someone that has samples of past listings for Amazon. Whatever that is, you want to start with that on the interview, because you don't want to go through the 10, 20, 30-minute interview and then ask that one thing that you need them to be able to do right at the end and then realize that they're not a fit. So prioritize, front load your interview questions with the most important stuff, and try to create a process for interviewing. Every interview isn't just all over the place. It should be, hey, here are 10 questions I want to ask. And from that interview, maybe you're like, you know what, I didn't really learn very much from this question. I'm going to eliminate that. And maybe you have a good or a bad hiring experience and you kind of go back and you're like, oh, if I had asked this question a little differently, I would have saved my time there. So start with a template, and we have a free interview template in our Facebook group, Outsourcing Masters, and which you can steal, you can tweak it, but start really coming up with a process and use every interview as a way to not only identify what questions you should be asking, but also what order you're going to be asking those questions.
Yeah, it's a good point, because sometimes like you're kind of setting the stage with what it's going to be like to work with you, with the questions you ask and how you ask them. And sometimes even to your point, the order you ask them. Now, I'm sure you've gotten feedback, positive and how do I make this better type of feedback from your clients. So what are maybe 2 or 3 questions that probably everyone should ask that maybe they don't ask?
So I'm going to steal this one from someone I actually started using. I'm trying to think of who it was. I'll think of it in a second. But a great question is, okay, you have a project. It's due at the end of the week. Friday comes around. It's getting late on Friday, and you realize that no matter what you do, this project is not going to get done. How do you handle that? And you just learn a lot about someone. Are they someone that's going to skip their weekend and get this project done? Are they someone that's going to communicate at a high level? Or are they someone that's going to push it off to the next week? You kind of get an insight of what type of person you're going to be working with, because stuff happens in business. Things get pushed behind, listings get suspended. You have to stop what you're doing sometimes and just solve issues. And depending on how important it is for you to have people around that can stop what they're doing and get stuff done, that's important to you. If I have a team of 15 people, but no one can work on weekends, and by 5 p.m. on Friday, nothing is getting done till Monday, that's a huge issue. Business just doesn't work like that. So to me, that's a great question. I like to ask people to rank their skills 1 to 10 and to give me reasons for each of those, which gives you a good insight. If someone's ranked themselves a 9 and 10 and they have 3 months of experience doing it, that's a pretty big red flag. You also get to see how honest people are and some supporting evidence of why they think that they're qualified for certain things, plus also their weaknesses. What are they not so good at or not as comfortable with? And you want to get out of the mentality of taking people that are bad at something and making them good at it, and instead focusing on what people are good at and not giving them projects on things that they're bad at. So those are a few. I also like to learn a little bit about just them as a person, what motivates them, because everyone gets motivated by something differently. Some people just like stability. Some people want a title. Some people want money. They only care about money. Other people love graphic design and they just want to do as much graphic design as they possibly can every single week. And if you don't know what motivates people, it's going to be hard to work with them, whether they're a full-time VA or some freelancer you go to for projects here and there.
Okay. Yeah, that all makes sense. So I guess there's really not a magic question. It really does just depend on the situation is what you're saying. So
there are no magic questions where someone says this answer and you're just like, oh, great hire. And I once took a college class on how to interview. Like, it didn't teach me how to do anything well. It just taught me how to answer interview questions. So you have to be looking for red flags. That you're not looking for the right answers. You're looking for red flags, the wrong answers, as you're going through that process.
I like that you said that. So one of the things I've learned from when I was in hotels, when I was in insurance, now, with my own business, is that anytime I'm interviewing someone, it really comes down to, it's almost like, with doctors, it's the Socratic method of like, they're trying to narrow down what it's not to figure out what your illness might be. It's kind of a lot of times the same thing. Like, you're looking for red flags. Like, okay, and some of this only comes from experience. So it's like, you just got to get in the arena. But like, every time someone talked about something, then like maybe it was like they're bad mouthing their employer in a certain way, their previous employer. And then like every time the people I hired and it's like, oh, but I'll just look past that because they're nice or whatever. Then all of a sudden I realize, oh, these are the people that call in all the time or whatever. It's like the baggage tends to be following everywhere they go. And some of that you don't know. And it's like, some of it's very subtle. It's not like, oh yeah, I call in a lot and I'm not dependable. No one ever says that. But one of the things I always learned is that people are the best they're ever going to be sometimes in the interview. Like it typically doesn't get better. Do you find that to be the case?
Definitely. And I've told clients this who are hiring VAs for the first time. I'm like, listen, you can interview them for 10 minutes. You can interview them for 2 hours. You can interview them 3 different times over the course of a week. And you're still not going to know everything until you actually get started working with them. And that initial key, that initial test few hours, whatever it is, that's when you're going to learn 50% of it. And yeah, the interview is great. I want to avoid wasting my time as much as possible. And I want to try to find those red flags. And it's also going to give me information to use later. But there's a certain element to diving in with someone that you have to be able to do. You have to be willing to do. And if you're not ever willing to get to that stage because you're so caught up on, I need to vet this person to every possible extent so there's no chance of failure, you're going to miss out on a lot of good opportunities.
Yeah, and that makes sense. There is a balance. It can't just be everything is a red flag. They're not going to do it all as well as me, because I think a lot of times people get caught up in that it's not going to be done as well as me. Well, maybe it will, maybe it won't, and maybe it doesn't need to be done as well as you do. So once you've hired them, now you're in the situation of like, oh boy, now I got to actually get them to do something. So now we've gone from the, posting the job to interviewing for the job to now they're doing it. So what have you find works with setting expectations and getting it done the way you want it?
Yeah, so I try to just eliminate as much gray area as possible. I like to set up communication channels like, hey, this is how we use Slack, this is how we use phone, this is how we use email. Expectations there, hey, if I email you, I get responses within a business day at all times. Really trying to set those expectations. I try to go into the actual work, the scope of the project, what they should be doing, what they should be getting from me. And it kind of depends on whether you're hiring the follower, the doer, or the expert. If I'm hiring a follower, I'm going to have SOPs. I'm going to have as much information as possible about the role, the task, what they're going to be doing, what's worked in the past with good VAs, what hasn't worked with people that haven't worked with me, the actual steps that they go through, and then the do not do things for any reason, like do not email seller performance without my permission for anything. So
Right.
really identify those SOPs, and I like to value my time at the highest possible level. So I'll give them those SOPs, and for the first week, my SOPs are very long. Yours could be a day, a few hours, whatever it is. I just have them read it and ask questions, and I'm there to help. My team's there to help. We want to support them in any way we can, but I don't want to do any one-on-one onboarding until I know they actually understand the SOPs. And by the end of the week, they might know 80% of it. I'll test them, and that's great. I'll help get them that last 20%. But if at the end of the week, they know 30% of it, I'm not going to spend my time working with them trying to get them that last 70%. I'm going to pay them for their time because I believe in that, and I'm going to part ways on good terms, and I'm going to get someone else. And yeah, I lost a little bit of money, but I can always make more money. I can't get my time back. And
Right.
what a lot of entrepreneurs end up in that trap is they do some one-on-one onboarding with the VA. They're a week in, the VA's not really getting it. And then they're like, oh, but I already invested a week. So then they invest another week. And then there are 2 weeks that are gone. And then that person's getting a little more, but they're not really getting it. So do you start all over and lose 2 weeks forever? Or do you go into that third week? And it's just a path you don't want to go down. So you want to be valuing your time at the highest possible level. When you hire the doers, it's much more of a scope. You're trying to figure out, hey, what's success in this project? What's failure? How many revisions do I get? What are the due dates? Not just the due time, or not just the due date, but the due time. And it's not due next Tuesday. It's due next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So it's black and white. Everything is black and white. And then for the experts, it's really providing as much information about your business as possible. A good expert, a good agency, a good consultant, they're going to ask a ton of questions for you. They're going to do their due diligence. And then creating some milestones for, hey, we're going to check in every month, every week, whatever it is. These are the metrics that we should be hitting. This is how we're going to communicate along the way. That's more of that, what that relationship is like. And it's a little bit more of a collaboration. So it just depends what level you're looking for. And that's how I set expectations.
Okay, good. So now expectations have been set. Let's say they're doing the job. So I know people are on opposite ends of the spectrum sometimes, where they're the kind of set it and forget it. And it's just, I got the process, I let it go. And then there's other people that are like helicopter parents, except managing people. Like they're watching everything. So what's the best mix of helicopter parenting and set it and forget it? Like that you've noticed anyway.
Yeah, and I have awesome VAs. I mentioned I have 15 VAs out on my team, and a bunch of them are team leaders. They've been with me for 2 years, and I don't have to micromanage them at all. And then other people are newer, and I'm not doing it, but my team leaders are checking in with them all the time. So for me, it's about building that trust. I want to work with people that I can, one, say something once, two, that they can kind of figure it out by themselves, and three, that they're going to, when something does get escalated, something's not going the way it should, they can handle it the right way pretty much every single time. They don't make the situation worse, right? So for me, I'm building trust with someone over time. If I'm giving them the SOP and they're getting it, and they let's say they mess up an email and I correct them, and they just don't make that mistake again for months.
Right.
And something happens on the weekend and they handle it in the right way and they help and they vibrate you, whatever it is, then I give them more trust, more leeway. I don't have to check in with them. I'm building it. If I'm going in circles and I've repeated someone 3 times, chances are that's not the only thing that they're messing up. There's probably something else in there that's going wrong. So me or a team leader has to go in and manage that at a much higher, more over the shoulder type level. So that's it's the people that kind of get stuck in the in-between, where someone's doing a really good job. They have an awesome VA, but they're still constantly micromanaging. They're constantly looking over their shoulder. They're not giving them any freedom. or someone who they haven't built any trust. The person's not really doing things right. They haven't double checked all their work, and they're just letting that person go free reign on their business. So you got to figure out how you build that over time and slowly reduce that level of micromanaging.
Gotcha. And yeah, this is a good point. A lot of it comes down to trust. And some of it is we have to, as the entrepreneur, trust a little bit to within reason. We don't have to go crazy on it. But, it comes down to, I've just found that, we hold on to these things because they're kind of our baby and we don't want to let go sometimes. But it's like, because I was recently talking to somebody about this where it was like, there's some people that they quality control every single unit that comes in. And it's like, well, you can either do an inspection or if, you're worried about it getting, messed up in transport, hire someone to do it, go through it with them and check it after the fact. So it's like, you don't have to do everything. Now, one of the things though, is as we're scaling up, so kind of transitioning from that, we're scaling up. When is it you start looking at, okay, I need to hire the expert for something versus maybe I need to hire, and you brought it up, the team leader. So now you've got teams of people. Where's kind of that balance of when to hire one or the other?
Yeah. So the teams of people is more in the followers, and that's someone that's going to step up and they've learned your system, they've learned your process, and then you're able to give them more responsibility to be in charge of tasks, to be in charge of people, whatever it is. In terms of like what level to hire between like the mid-level and the expert level, it really comes down to, do you need someone else's advice? Do you need someone else's strategy? If you just need a listing done, but you don't really care about the overall picture or a long-term game plan, you just need this listing optimized right now, that mid-level person's perfect. If you need someone who's going to optimize a bunch of your listings and it's got to align with your brand and other stuff that you're doing, you need more strategy, you need more consulting, you got to err on the side of that expert. And keep in mind, these are real people. They don't always fit into perfect levels. The levels are really there to help you figure out, hey, do I need someone to follow directions? Do I need someone to do a project? Do I need someone to bring their expertise to the table?
So if you're hiring the expert person, let's just say, how do you gauge this person truly is an expert? Because I know that's probably the fear of a lot of people of like, oh, okay, if I'm going to invest a certain amount into a certain person, how do you recommend that they gauge, okay, this person really is an expert in what they're talking about, or this person's just regurgitating something they learned on YouTube?
Yeah, great questions. So you've got three things that we care about when we're vetting on FreeUp. We got skill, attitude, and communication. So skill, you got to do your research, right? You don't have to be a PPC master, but you got to understand the terminology. You got to understand what's up to date right now. Right? And so that'll allow you to answer intelligent questions and be able to get someone's background, their references, campaigns they've worked on in the past, be able to read it, stuff like that. So there is that vetting part of it. Keep in mind, you might not be an expert in everything. So it's impossible to implement that at the highest level, where if I was going to hire a VA, I'm going to have a pretty good idea what their skills are as a VA because I know how to do everything myself. But the key to hiring the expert is the attitude and the communication. When you focus on attitude and you find someone who is passionate about what they do, they love PPC or they love branding, whatever it is, when you find someone that doesn't get aggressive when things don't go their way, when they can be the bigger man, the bigger woman, not all clients, not all accounts are rainbows and butterflies, right? Like stuff happens. You have to be able to handle that. When you find people that are working towards solutions rather than clashing and trying to fight with everyone over everything, someone who's not just in it for the money, that actually loves what they're doing. And then I'll also fast forward to communication. When you find people that communicate at a high level, respond within a business day, speak your language at a high level, can actually give you clarity and get on the same page quickly without giving you nonsense and be able to actually explain things to you that you might not understand. When you find people who have great attitude and you find people that have strong communication skills, they tend to be a lot more honest about what they can and cannot do on the skill set side as well. So there's no 100% like, you put them through this PPC test and they're an expert. And if they get below this grade, they're not an expert. You have to use your research to figure out, hey, did I vet them on the skill part of it to the best of my ability? But then what red flags am I seeing in the attitude and the communication as well? Because it's very rare that you're like, wow, this person had a great attitude. This person had a great communication, but they just completely lied about their skill set. Of course it happens, but all you're trying to do when you're hiring someone is improve the percentages. And by vetting for the attitude and the communication and not just the skill, you're increasing your percentage for success.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it really comes down to like, you want to enjoy working with them. especially if you feel like you're spending a little extra money on their expertise. And then the expertise itself, as long as you have a baseline understanding of like, okay, pay per click, it's paying, PPC means pay per click, and, the basics of it, then you can at least ask them about strategy questions and see their recommendations and see if you agree with it. Or if you don't agree with it, can you have a conversation around it and they can, to your point, explain it in a way that makes sense? Or, you can at least have the discussion about, is it within their limitations? Do they know well? And then you can have more of a comfort level. Because I think 90% of it comes down to comfort level with working with someone else. So now transitioning into the teams. So let's say now we're growing our business. We've got a bunch of doers and followers. We've hired some experts, but now it's like, okay, I can't spend all my time on the doers and the followers because the business has gotten so big, kind of like what you've gotten with the 15 folks that you've got team leaders. So how do you manage teams and how do you hire the team leaders?
Yeah, so the team that I mentioned is actually just my customer service team. If you think of the 3 core parts of FreeUp, you've got my billing team, which pays people, charges clients, handles all that. You've got what we call our freelance success team, which is recruitment, getting more applicants, interviewing them, figuring out who gets on the platform, who doesn't. And then you got the customer service team, and they all kind of work together. So for me, I put team leaders in each one. So we got a team leader for billing. There's only like 3 or 4 people in the billing team. That's one of those teams that's pretty scalable. If we have to pay 500 freelancers or 1,000 freelancers or 2,000 freelancers, it's not like that team needs to get bigger. It's mostly automated. It's mostly uploading documents. The workload doesn't really increase. Whereas the success team, if we go from getting 2,000 applicants a week to 4,000 applicants a week, we probably need more people in the success team. Same thing with customer service. So identifying which teams are more flexible and scalable and which ones are going to be able to handle that growth is important. And what we did is we put a team leader in each one. The success team has an assistant team leader because they get a good amount of volume. And customer service, since that's more 24/7, we're not doing interviews 24/7, and billing's not 24/7 either. It's really once a week and random stuff throughout, like fixed prices. For the customer service, it's 24/7. We have a morning team leader, we have an afternoon team leader, and then we have 2 assistant team leaders that help them because stuff gets crazy around busy season. So figuring out what structure actually works that lets you actually step out from the day-to-day operations of your business. And there's a little bit of trial and error. There's a little bit of tweaking, but one of the most important things is setting up the communication standards. So if I have 15 people and all of them are coming to me for every little thing, that doesn't work. They need to know to go to the team leaders, go to the assistant team leaders for stuff, but they also need to know what's escalated, when to escalate. Let's say that they're working and the team leader is on break and our software goes down. Yes, they should Viber me. They shouldn't wait until the team leader comes back. So teaching them like where that threshold is and also trying to push that threshold up as much as possible. If this is everything crashing and like the biggest issue FreeUp has ever had, and this is like let's say an angry customer or something that someone's handling for the first time, my goal is to keep pushing that higher and higher so they can handle more and more. So that means when a new situation comes in, I don't want to have to teach 15 people, have them each experience it for them to understand it. If a new situation comes in, we have a chat where we'll post it in to teach everyone at once so they keep getting better and better and moving that line up and up. And then to go along with communication, I mentioned before we have 3 types of ways to communicate. You got email, you got Skype, and then you got phone, and phone's broken down into Viber and WhatsApp. So phone is for emergencies only. If I have a quick update, I'm not going to Viber someone. If they're not going to message me at 7 o'clock at night over a $25 issue, that doesn't make sense. And if that is happening on week 1, then I'm going to correct it. I'm going to say, hey, that's not really Viber worthy. Like this is, you should have Skyped that. You should have emailed it. Skype it, and other people can use Slack, is more for day-to-day conversations. If it's a meeting, if it's an interview, if we're talking about a project going back and forth, let's say that you hire a developer, you don't want to be just communicating with them through email. That's not going to end up very well for you. You need to actually be able to have conversations back and forth where you're both online at the same time and you're not waiting for hours to get a response. And then email is respond within a business day or respond next time you work. And those are just for updates for stuff that isn't urgent, that isn't pressing for right now. So, and you can, I recommend 3, and then you can substitute them in for whatever software you want, if you like Slack instead of Skype or whatever. But figure out what your communications channels are and make sure that everyone's on the same page for when to use what. If something's coming in and you're getting Slack messages and sometimes they're emailing and sometimes they're texting you and it's all over the place, you're never really going to be able to step out of the day-to-day operations of your business.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, one question I do have, just a real quick clarified question. Viber, I'm not familiar with Viber. What would that be most similar to?
Viber and WhatsApp are just free apps on your phone for international texting and calls. So
okay.
if it's a US developer, they would text me. If it's someone in the Philippines, they're going to Viber me. But either way, I'm responding on my phone.
Got it. Okay, got it. So it's very similar to WhatsApp. Okay, so it's like
same
text
thing as
messaging.
WhatsApp. It's a competitor.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got systems where you've created boundaries, because at the same time too, the whole point of bringing on the team was to make it so your life was simpler, not your life was 24 hours complicated. But if something does need to be escalated, you have the ability that they can get a hold of you. So one thread I've heard in almost every single question I've asked here is communication. So it sounds like communication is huge, no matter whether you've got a expert or you've got a team or you just got one follower that you're working with. So any other beginning tips for communication that you might give?
Yeah, communication is one of those things you have to establish. You have to talk about it and actually have a conversation.
Right.
And
you have to communicate about it.
You got to communicate about it, but you can't let it go off the track. And you have to be willing to pull it back in very, very quickly. If someone Vibers me at night and I'm busy, let's say I'm out with my fiance and I just quickly respond and then I move over to the other thing, that does not set the right tone for communication. They're just going to Viber me next time and next time and next time. I have to quickly correct anything that's going out of that way. And so one of the terms of use on the FreeUp platform is you have to respond within a business day at all times. We remove people from our platform that don't. We don't have time to chase people around. Our clients don't have time to chase people around. So if a client goes and 3 days have gone by and they're not saying anything, and then the freelancer finally responds and they just proceed as normal, respond back. Next time it could be 4 days, it could be 2 days, it could be 5 days. You've got to set that expectation. And that doesn't mean that you have to go crazy and someone emails you back in 25 hours instead of 24 and you're like, I'm never working with you again. And you drop the project and you lose like thousands of dollars. But it does mean you're like, hey, listen, like going forward, can you confirm that you're going to respond within a business day at all times? And just resetting those boundaries quickly and pulling them back is incredibly important.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, because at the end of the day, you have to set the boundaries, and when you start doing I'll just respond real quick, you're teaching them, if you just need a quick answer, just send the message anyway. So yeah, so whatever the methodology is, you can work with them. So let's say you're now getting to a point where you've got a team or whatever, or you're just one person, but you're starting to realize you've set the expectations, you thought it was working out at first, and it's just not working out. When is it time to pull the cord and look for someone else? And when is it the time to keep working on it? You kind of touched on that earlier for someone who's new, but let's say they've been with you for 6 months and you're starting to get the feeling like maybe your business has changed or they're just not cutting it.
So this is how I handle it. I pause everything. All work stops until we meet. They can't just keep working when issues are happening. If it's a communication issue, quality issue, whatever it is, everything stops. Take a step back. We meet about it. I try to get any information possible about why that's happening. I reset expectations, make sure we're on the same page, get it in writing, get them to confirm it. Try, if anything, if they are confused about something, like maybe what a business day is or whatever it is, I make sure that they understand it, get them to confirm it. And then once we're on the same page, only then do I proceed forward. And we do not leave that meeting until we're on the same page. If we can't leave that meeting on the same page, we're not going to work together anymore. Once we leave that meeting and they proceed forward, they're on a short leash. If they're crushing it, they keep going. If we have those issues, again, we pause everything, take a step back, and only when we're on the same page do we move forward. And if you find yourself doing that over and over again, you're probably going to have to make a move. Usually, if someone's a pretty good hire, that's not going to happen. It might happen once or worst case twice. Now, there are other things to keep in mind. I have a bookkeeper, Marius, who's an absolute rock star. And 2 years ago, in January, he was like making all these mistakes, and billing mistakes are obviously very important. And he had never made mistakes before. So I paused everything, took a step back, met with him, and I was just like, what's going on, man? This isn't like you. You're a rock star. You don't make mistakes like this. And I could have gone into that meeting like screaming and yelling, like, how dare you mess this up? Like you cost me $100. But instead, I just asked him questions and I listened to him. And it turns out he was just burnt out. He had just finished up busy season. We were in January, and I gave him a week and a half off, and he came back, and he's been crushing it ever since. So there's a certain element to just listening to people that can't be forgotten.
Yeah, it's a good point because they're not robots. So sometimes what we think is happening is just head trash that we're making up. That, like, oh, they're not doing it because they hate me, or, some ridiculous thing we've got in our
Right.
head. But the reality is most of the time it's something figure outable, or if it's not, then, maybe it's time to part waters or whatever the case is. But part waters should be an extreme thing. So to your point, it's not just like, oh, they made me mad because they didn't do it on exact time, but have the conversation. Do they really understand the expectation? Pause the work, take a step back, just like you said. So, all right. So one question I do have to kind of start to wrap this up here is, I know you deal with a lot of, sellers, and you deal with a lot of freelancers that do different work. Getting outside of freelancing, so to speak, just in general with what works selling and what doesn't work, you must hear, horror stories and really success stories. So what's kind of the common thread that you're hearing of what makes people more successful than others?
Yeah, to me, and one of my business mentalities, and one of the reasons I love working with clients that kind of have the same mentality is that trial and error approach, and not being afraid to fail and trying lots of different things at all times. There's a lot of, gurus and courses and being like, oh, like do it this way and you'll have success. And that's great. And you can take that information and you can apply it to your business, but you have to be trying lots of different things too. And some of the best sellers that I've seen grow over the years, they're constantly, all right, let's put some money into Instagram. Let's put a little bit of money into Facebook. Let's spend some money on content. And they know that not every little thing is going to be like immediate ROI. Like if you run a good PPC campaign, or if you optimize a listing and your sales increase right away, but they're playing more of a long-term game. They're not afraid to fail. And you're going to come across things that end up working really well that you can put more money into and double down. And certain things might not work and you can pull back and try it again later. But the people who are just like, you know what, I need a good listing, I need a good picture, I need PPC, I'm growing my Amazon business, that's it, I'm not focused on anything else, that's a very short-term play. The people who are growing bigger businesses, they're trying lots of different things, whether it's external traffic, creative ways to get reviews, whatever that is, and they just are constantly experimenting. They're really allocating a percentage, whether it's 5%, 10% of their spending budget, into just experimental stuff to try to be one of the first people that comes across that new way to grow their business.
Yeah, that makes so much sense because, if everyone's doing the exact thing that everyone else is doing, they're going to all get the same results. And, and it's not as fun. But, when you're trying different things, you can find that thing that works, that maybe it works for your product that doesn't work for the way the guru is teaching it or whatever the case is. So, yeah, that's such an important thing. So just to kind of close this out here, I'm sure people listening are like, I want to hear more about what Nathan has to say or learn more about this FreeUp marketplace. Where would they go to learn more?
Yeah, so real quick, FreeUp gets thousands of applicants every week, virtual assistants, freelancers, agencies from all over the world. We vet them, top 1% get onto our platform. We make them available to clients quickly whenever they need them, free to sign up, no monthly fees, no minimums. You put in a request and we fill it. And on the back end, we have 24/7 support in case you have even the smallest issue, and a no turnover guarantee. If someone quits, we cover replacement costs and get you a new person right away. So that's what we're about: the pre-vetting, the speed, the customer service, and the protection. Go to freeup.com. My calendar is right at the top. You can book a meeting with me. You can book a meeting with my VAs who are rock stars. You can take phone calls and answer all your questions. You can create a free account, mention this podcast, get a $25 credit to try us out. And also join my Facebook group, Outsourcing Masters, where we post a lot of content to help you hire and scale your business.
Cool. How do you make sure, just out of curiosity, how do you make sure that they're the top 1%?
So we vet them for what I talked about before: skill, attitude, and communication. So when I say 1%, we actually let in 1 out of every 100 applicants. We get about 2,000 applicants a week to get on our platform. So we look for people who are honest about what they can and cannot do. We don't care if they're a 10 out of 10, a 5 out of 10, a 3 out of 10, as long as they're honest. And they're not taking on projects they can't do at a high level. We do one-on-one interviews for attitude. We look for people who are passionate and not aggressive and everything I talked about before.
Right.
And we have communication best practices that they have to memorize and get tested on. And we're very quick to remove people from our platform if they're not communicating, showing signs of bad attitude, or taking on projects they can't do at a high level.
Cool. All right, cool. So yeah, I definitely recommend checking out your Facebook group. And I know you said, did you mention it or not? The podcast?
Yeah, my podcast is called Outsourcing and Scaling, which Kevin will be on in a few months.
Yeah, I look forward to that. I look forward to that. Yeah, this has been a great conversation. I've picked up a lot of good golden nuggets here that I'm going to implement into my own business and some of the hiring strategies I use. So I really appreciate you being so giving with this information, Nathan.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thanks.